Call this hearing to order. Appreciate all of you coming out today. Good to see you. We're going to consider these bills, as you might imagine, in some order that I can't recall. I'm not quite sure why we're considering them in the order in which we're considering them, but that's okay. We're going to start with S2531 and H4222. For the record, by the way, I'm State Senator Michael Barrett. I'm joined here by my staff. There could be additional members, Senate members of the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy joining us remotely. And if so, I welcome them. I want to welcome those of you who are in the room and also those of you who may be joining us remotely just as observers or as interested parties. I do want to hear, with respect to S2531 and H4222, witnesses who have called up to testify, and we would begin with Kat Burnham of Advanced Energy United, who may be with us remotely.
Good morning, Senator. Can you hear me?
I can. You're coming through loud and clear, Kat. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Barrett and members of the committee. I'm Kat Burnham. I'm a senior principal here on behalf of Advanced Energy United to support House Bill 4222 and Senate Bill 2531. Our team represents the full range of advanced technologies, and we're united in our mission to achieve 100% clean power. I want to start off noting that Massachusetts is a leader on climate action thanks to the strong leadership of this committee, establishing robust decarbonization goals and dedication to electrify heating and transportation. Unfortunately, though, our current energy infrastructure is not sufficient to meet those goals, and we urgently need additional grid capacity. Siting and building new transmission lines is necessary, but it can be time intensive with considerable upfront costs. But fortunately, grid enhancing technologies known as GETs can be deployed swiftly. GETs can make the power grid more reliable, flexible, and efficient. There are three widely accepted definitions of GETs as defined by the Department of Energy and other industry leaders. The first is dynamic line rating, which measures the real-time capacity of power lines based on ambient conditions like temperature or wind. The second is advanced power flow control, allowing operators to reroute power from constrained areas to those with available capacity. And finally, topology optimization helps identify bottlenecks and prevents lines from becoming too congested. In the bill, there are other advanced technologies distinct from GETs that can also be used to optimize the grid to safely and quickly increase the ability to integrate more renewable energy. One is advanced reconductoring that replaces old cables and leverages existing infrastructure. And the other is energy storage as a transmission asset. Like advanced reconductoring and GETs, storage as a transmission asset have faster development timelines, smaller construction disturbances. All of these technologies have demonstrated they can work, and we offer additional details in our written testimony. This legislation is very sensible. It requires that when distribution companies propose intrastate upgrades into the system, they must conduct an analysis of, demonstrating they've considered multiple strategies to address the situation, and then report that analysis to the Department of Public Utilities. We look forward to working with you, the committee, and other stakeholders to make sure that this legislation achieves our shared goals and is well within the state jurisdiction of the DPU. All of these advanced energy tools are important for the clean energy transition, so we respectfully request that the bill language be adjusted to clearly distinguish that advanced conductors and storage as a transmission asset are separate from the definition of GETs, but they're also unique and important solutions in and of themselves. I'll just wrap up by saying that this is appropriate legislation to elevate these different technologies to maximize the capacity of the grid, and these are achievable near-term solutions. So we encourage the committee to vote these bills out favorably. I appreciate your consideration of my testimony and welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Kat. I appreciate your testifying and certainly agree with you. Speaking now just as an individual member of the committee, the Senate chair, certainly agree with you that technologies of these kind need to be considered probably before altogether new construction is undertaken. Using these technologies, as you know, is much less expensive, so people who pay electric bills will be able to pay less, but at the same time, they also seem to have substantial capacity to improve the current infrastructure's throughput, ability to pass electrons back and forth. All that's very good. However, there's a significant semantic problem that I'm interested in getting your help in resolving. I think you may be familiar with it. In general, I've raised it in meetings of the Clean Energy Transmission Working Group. And here's my problem.
Sure.
The term GETS, Grid Enhancement Technologies, seems to have a limited definition. Things seem to be evolving, morphing, so that it's hard to pin down the precise meaning that we might put into law. But I feel we need to get this right, because whatever is going to be in statute is going to stay there for years and could limit effectively the technologies that we're able to encompass or take into account. So for example, I will point out to you that in the US Code, an altogether different term that seems to be broader appears, and I cite 42 USC 16422, a defined term there in the US Code for advanced transmission technologies, or ATTs. Advanced transmission technologies are defined to include many of the technologies that you would like to organize under the separate term grid enhancement technologies. And as I say, it's important we get this right. Here's a US Department of Energy study dated December of 2020, so that's only about 3.5 years old. And the approved term is advanced transmission technology in this US Department of Energy study. And it, as I say, includes much of what you would define under a separate set of terminologies. There's no question that the US Department of Energy then confused things 2 years later in February of 2022 by putting out a separate report with a separate title, Grid Enhancement Technologies. But it's clear, as most discussions of your preferred term are, that what's intended here is quite limited. Only 2 technologies are mentioned. You've expanded the family of technologies to be covered to 3. But still, it doesn't seem to be a term that anticipates all kinds of developments in the future that we are likely to have and that would need to be encompassed too. I will mention, because U.S. Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm always mentions this, that advanced reconductoring or advanced conductors are something in which they see great promise. Line Vision, which is a Massachusetts company, I happen to be holding its business card here for its CEO, prefers the GETS term, and you know that well because you talked to Line Vision. But VEIR, a Woburn company, is into superconducting transmission cables and doesn't come under the narrower definitions of GETS that one hears bruited about. Instead, it really falls under the advanced reconductoring umbrella that President Biden and Secretary Granholm have been interested in. So the Clean Energy Transmission Working Group, there's a question coming eventually. The Clean Energy Transmission Working Group, at my request, struck GETS as its preferred term to describe this ever-enlarging family of improvements available to the existing grid, and did substitute what seems to be the broader term, which is advanced transmission technologies. And I wonder whether we ought to go that way. Your bill, the one you're proposing today, which I did submit on your behalf, as did the House, but of course is always subject to refinement and improvement. Your bill treats advanced reconductoring as apart from grid enhancement technologies. I will quote, for example, some wording that one of your lawyers proffered to us. For purposes involving the DPU, we would require the electric companies to conduct cost-effectiveness studies of multiple strategies, and now I'm quoting, including but not limited to the deployment of grid-enhancing technologies, and then separately advanced reconductoring and energy storage used as a transmission resource. So there you're treating advanced reconductoring as apart from this GET stuff. But in your bill, elsewhere, you included under the GETS label as a fourth technology you're willing to see advanced. It seems as if nobody has really settled on the way they'd like to handle wording. Wording is critical if we're going to write a state law that's going to stick around for a long time. GETS doesn't seem to have a defined, stable meaning. And so my question, and I apologize for being so long-winded about this, my question is whether we oughtn't to go with the Clean Energy Transmission Working Group's preferred term, which they substituted for GETS at the very last minute, but nevertheless embraced, and that preferred term is ATTs, Advanced Transmission Technology, which includes all your GET stuff, but is more ample and more flexible and would encompass additional stuff coming down the pipe, like these superconducting cables that this Woburn startup VEIR hopes to bring to market someday. What do you think?
Well, first, I appreciate the question, Senator, and I am with you 100% that we do want to get this language right. We want this to be something that can stick and is implementable, and we definitely don't want to limit options on the table. So the intent of the bill, as you alluded, is we want to be inclusive to different technology types, and certainly there are many technologies and multiple ways to describe them. In general, advanced conductors are not considered grid-enhancing technologies, which is why in my testimony wanted to make that distinction from the definitions, but GETS were certainly a motivator for us to introduce this bill. So we see it as one of many options and solutions, and so definitely would be open to working with you and the committee members and others to make sure we have a definition that is inclusive of different resources and welcomes innovation, because of course this is a moving target. So we want to have an efficient system with technologies that are the right fit, that are, as you mentioned, cost effective and reliable, and so I think that's something we'd be open to, absolutely.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that flexibility, and we will continue to talk to you and to everyone else so that we can get this wording right. I want to thank you. Those are really my only questions here. I guess I do have one little niggling question. As you know, statewide utilities cover the distribution aspect of the grid. Interstate transmission lines are considered separate. The dividing line is very amorphous, no question, and at the borders, the interstate stuff blends into the intrastate stuff, but still, your wording mentions transmission as well as distribution. And is that just because it's a boilerplate way of covering your bases, or do you really have in mind that you would like the state law to try to affect interstate activity?
Appreciate the question. Want to be clear that we definitely want to stay within the jurisdiction of the DPU and what's within their authority for state intrastate work, not interstate. That's not within their authority, and so we want to be considerate of that, and we don't want to overstep on that front. So do want to be careful and shine a bright light that we want to make sure that these technologies are considered within the purview of the DPU.
Thank you, Kat, very much. I'm very pleased to be joined by Senator Mark Pacheco here, the vice chair of this committee. Kat represents Advanced Energy. Whoops, I want to make sure your title is right. I'm going to screw that up if I'm not careful. Why don't you reintroduce yourself to Senator Pacheco?
Good morning, Senator. I'm Kat Burnham with Advanced Energy United.
So we've just been engaging in a colloquy, which is concluded. We're going to go on.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Kat. Good to have you join us remotely.
Thank you for your time.
I think Kyle Murray wants to testify on this bill as well.
I didn't recognize you behind the mask.
It's hard. It's hard to spot him. Yeah.
Good disguise. And now the surprise reveal, of course. Chair Barrett, Vice Chair Pacheco, members of the committee. My name is Kyle Murray, and I'm the Director of State Program Implementation and Massachusetts Program Director for Acadia Center. Acadia Center is a nonprofit research and advocacy organization that works to advance bold, effective, and equitable clean energy solutions. The organization has a long history of advocacy for creating a fully integrated, flexible, and low-carbon energy grid. Addressing these issues will help the Commonwealth advance a future of lower ratepayer costs, more local jobs, fewer greenhouse gas emissions, and better public health. I am also a member of the Commonwealth's Grid Modernization Advisory Council, though I am not here in that capacity today. As all of you on this committee are aware, the transition to our fully electrified future will require significant building and spending to ensure that we have the proper infrastructure in place to manage future electric demand. However, the scale isn't exactly the dire situation that has been presented, with some estimates calling for a tripling of our load. We really have only scratched the surface of exceptionally cost-effective solutions like energy efficiency or demand response. Make no mistake, significant investment and build-out still will be required. However, there is still so much to be done with existing infrastructure. S2531, filed by you, Chair Barrett, and H4222, filed by Chair Roy, propose incredibly important steps down these paths, and I am here in favor of both those bills. They focus on grid enhancing or enhancement technologies, which, as the bills define, are any hardware or software technology that enables enhanced or more efficient performance from the electric transmission system, including but not limited to dynamic line rating, advanced power flow control technology, topology optimization, advanced reconductoring, and energy storage when used as a transmission resource. Put simply, grid enhancing or enhancement technologies are often incredibly cost-effective technologies that help us maximize our existing infrastructure. One example I heard recently involved a sensor that cost around $100,000 being installed. That sensor alone negated the need for an infrastructure expansion that would have cost millions of dollars. This legislation would, for base rate proceedings and other proceedings in which a distribution company proposes capital improvements or additions to the transmission system, require the distribution companies to conduct a cost effectiveness and timetable analysis of multiple strategies, including but not limited to the deployment of grid enhancing or enhancement technologies, advanced reconductoring, and energy storage used as a transmission resource. This is a common sense approach to help us maximize our grid resources and save ratepayers money. Now, we are still reviewing this legislation. It's likely that we will propose some language tweaks, and we will follow up with those with further written comments. However, I just did want to show up to show my strong support for these proposals. Additionally, I wanted to speak briefly to S2529, an act reducing the financial penalty imposed on customers who shift to heat pumps, electric appliances, and electric vehicles, filed by you, Chair Barrett. Again, we are still reviewing this legislation, but I wanted to note that we greatly appreciate your work on rate reform. We know that energy affordability and electrification incentivization is an incredibly important issue, and I want to take time to just acknowledge your efforts on that, with this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this legislation today. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Senator Pacheco, do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, good. I do have a question. You heard the exchange with Advanced Energy United, but I have a separate question for you that I wouldn't mind hearing from AEU about, and should have asked her. There's a proposal here to authorize the DPU to grant performance incentives, essentially bonus payments.
Yes.
For utilities that employ fill in the blank, grid enhancement technologies, advanced transmission technologies. Why pay them, and I've got nothing against the electric utilities, but why pay them a bonus for doing their job? Now, granted, they make less money using these cost-saving technologies compared to building something anew. We know there's an incentive, if you will, or a risk of overbuilding because of the nature of our incentive system, a risk that these technologies avoid because they enhance the existing system. Still, paying a bonus for doing your job seems interesting.
I think you point out an important issue, and you raise you raise the for it arguments there of just, you're going to be earning less money, you want to avoid over build out. But we at Acadia Center do agree that when it comes to performance incentives, they should not be there for just doing your job. They should be there. You really need to be incentivizing with the performance incentives going above and beyond the daily course of business. So we're still, reviewing this legislation, but I would say we very heavily scrutinize the use of performance incentives for things that would be in what we would consider ordinary course of business.
Okay. I'm going to let Senator Pacheco decide whether to give performance incentives in this case. He knows these issues well. Maybe I'll express a view as well. Let me ask something about the other legislation on which you testified. I want you to know that legislation also is evolving, and like this GETS/ATT, Advanced Transmission Technology stuff, was meant to begin a conversation, not conclude one. With respect to rates, there's a fundamental conflict here, which is very strange, that we would appreciate your input on and the input of others. The current rate structure, the electric bill people get monthly, is volumetric in all respects, meaning the more kilowatts I use, the more I pay. But significant portions of the costs of the grid are fixed. They don't go up as I use more kilowatts. So we've got essentially a monthly bill that overcharges people if they do what we want them to do, which is to buy EVs, which consume electricity, or install heat pumps, also consumptive of electricity. So we're penalizing people for doing the right thing. That's a change from 10 years ago when we didn't want people consuming more electricity and where volumetric rates discouraged consumption. Energy efficiency, and 10 years ago, that was an unqualifiedly good thing. Now we want people to actually use more electricity so they use fewer fossil fuels, but more electricity runs up your bill. That's what my bill is intended to address. However, the problem that people have raised, and it's a good one, is that it actually penalizes solar. Solar reduces your electric bill because it generates electricity on your own roof, and the more we're charging by volume, the more you're incentivized to put on solar so that you're using electricity, but it's not coming from the grid. It's not coming from the electric companies. So now we have a situation where overcharging on volume helps rooftop solar, but discourages end uses like electric cars and electric heating. I'm looking for a restructured rate that balances the two. And I'm not, when I say I mean lots of people are worried about this issue. How can we get the DPU to try for a rate restructuring that strikes the balance I'm talking about? That's what this bill hopes to do.
Mm-hmm. So I did just, up front, I wanted to flag the DPU just opened an investigation into...
Only on low-income rates. I'm talking about middle-class people, upper middle-class people, poor people, you people, me people, my constituents. It's not just a low-income problem.
No, you're absolutely correct. I just wanted to flag that and note that I'm sure these sorts of discussions will be part of that investigation too. But you raise the issue very well of, rates and rate structures are some of the most incredibly complicated things we do in energy. There is a reason that the utilities have multiple rate experts on staff. And the answers to these questions are not easy. If it were easy, people would have already been doing this. We would have already implemented this. You raised, with this initial piece of legislation, you raised a very good proposal that then, that sounds great on the surface, and then we know, oh wait, this could potentially affect solar in negative ways. And I think that is the issue with any sort of rate proposal. There are always going to be pros and cons. There are always going to be some individuals who win and some individuals who lose out a little. So that is why there are, groups, myself, other environmental advocates who are really diligently working on this issue. I don't have an answer for you right now, but we are really working and hoping to get you, some information, some better information in the future. I know Department of Energy Resources is also working diligently on this issue, so I'm pretty confident that putting all our heads together, we can come up with a solution on this.
Well, thank you very much. Those are all my questions. Senator Pacheco.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and just for the record, both on the bill that you have filed, Mr. Chairman, and the bill that House Chair Roy has filed, I have asked to be on both of those bills, so I'm co-sponsoring those bills. And am very, very pleased to see the initiative that is coming from House Chair's office and your office working on these issues. It's going to be absolutely critical for us to move forward. And the performance standards you referenced in brief dialogue here with Mr. Murray, and as you said, why should we be incenting something when utilities should just be doing their job? Unfortunately, they have not been, because under existing law, they know where the requirements are and where they're supposed to be and where they're supposed to be heading. Not only the investor-owned utilities, but also the public utilities certainly know where they're supposed to be heading, and yet they're not moving fast enough. And so any incentives we can put in place to expedite the implementation of what we know we're going to need to meet the critical needs of an expanding economy, possibly doubling or tripling the amount of electricity that we'll be using to run our economy, and doing it in a way that hopefully will also take advantage of all of those things we used to do in yesteryear, as you referenced, with energy efficiency. And the government, both state and federal and NGOs and others, partnering to try to be a partner with the homeowner, with the business, with the manufacturer, to get us to where we need to be. It's going to be very critical. See, I've timed myself out, Mr. Chairman. No, I'm only kidding. So, but just want to conclude by saying that it's one of the reasons why I'm here is to be in support of both of these bills, to have us move forward as quickly as possible with appropriate language that may need to be tweaked between the two versions, and also to be here asking for consideration for Senate Bill 2488, which I filed, which from the beginning of this whole task of looking at where we are relative to climate and the needs we need to implement, we've always tried to reference the science. The 2008 statute that originally passed was based on the science at that time. We've updated the science each time post this last COP with the reports that have come out. This is what we're talking about now, 240, not 2050. And so I am simply here to say on the public record, Mr. Chairman, that I think along with these bills that we should also be updating the science to say where we need to be, and that's where those incentives come in.
Thank you.
Because we need to expedite the implementation of these bills. With that, I'm going to have to excuse myself because I just got called to be upstairs.
Point well taken,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Vice Chairman. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair.
Appreciate it. Is Natalie Hilt-Treat with us remotely?
I'm here.
Hi, Natalie. Calling you with respect to S 2531, but certainly you can talk about the other two bills as well.
Can you see me?
I can't see you. I can hear you well.
I don't know why I have, okay. Well, rather than fiddle with that, why don't I just get going? I have my camera turned on, I believe, but if you can hear me, that will do the job.
Yeah, I'm good.
We've met. Good morning, Chair Barrett, Vice Chair Pacheco, and committee members. My name is Natalie Hiltreat, and I'm Director of Public Policy at the Northeast Clean Energy Council. NECEC is a leading trade group representing all of the clean energy segments and a mission-driven organization working to advance the just, equitable, and rapid transition to a clean energy future and a diverse climate economy. I'll speak first in support of H 4222 and S 2531, Enact Advancing Grid Enhancement Technology. We've already had some good dialogue on that. The Commonwealth is racing to modernize the electric grid so that it can support the transition to clean energy generation and the decarbonization of buildings and vehicles. We must also find ways to mitigate the cost of these investments for businesses and consumers. The types of grid enhancement technologies, or GETs, outlined in these two bills are smart, cost-effective, and deployable today. Just as we need to wring all of the efficiency out of energy where we use it, we should absolutely require the support technologies that allow us to get more out of our electric transmission system. Grid enhancement technologies paired with energy storage and other smart controls can allow a better use of the grid we have today while planning the must-do enhancements for a resilient, reimagined electric grid. GETs are an exciting new set of enabling technologies. They let us do more with less. They can help speed the clean energy transition, and they are proven. I'll now speak in support of H 3967, an act supporting solar energy deployment in the Commonwealth. By creating clear solar deployment goals, this bill will strengthen existing commitments by adding more clarity on how decarbonization goals will be reached in Massachusetts and providing the resources necessary to do so. The new goal will more than double solar capacity over the next 6 years, with interim goals that are bold but achievable. The technical potential study on solar released last summer by DOER offers cities and towns data to inform local land use planning and to determine where and how much solar is appropriate in their community. New policy tools are needed to help leverage this robust analysis and ensure that each municipality does its part in helping the Commonwealth reach its renewable energy goals. Section 1 of the bill codifies the goal of 10 gigawatts of solar by 2030. Section 2 and 3 address the siting of solar power, which has become one of the biggest barriers to reaching our goals. Lastly, Section 4 makes a simple edit to existing statute that gives the Commonwealth the tools it needs to pursue every available opportunity to bring clean energy onto the regional grid. Thank you for your dedication to forging progress on clean energy and climate challenges and for the opportunity to testify before you today.
Thank you very much, Natalie. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
I do have a question about
a
question about H 3967.
Mm-hmm.
Your bill would try to cite more solar, and I have two questions. One is you cite, of course, the technical potential of solar study, and I'm speaking from memory here, so please forgive me. But what I recall is that the consultant that undertook that study qualified its findings. So DOER effectively qualified its findings and hedged just how granular the data was. Didn't claim that it was the final word in estimating how much solar could be sited within any given municipality. I believe instead that the study relied on maps and surveys done by satellite and was a good rough cut at estimating the potential, but didn't presume to be the final word. You would use the data, nevertheless, to hand out additional incentives to some communities and to judge when other communities fall short. Do you think that the technical potential of solar study can carry that much additional weight? Or are the qualifications cited within the study itself, if my memory serves, such that we should not use it to hand out money to one community and to withhold it from another?
Thank you, Chair Barrett. I will defer to some of our solar experts who I believe are also testifying today to get into the details, but I will say that, any analysis, any study can be pointed to for its shortcomings. There are other analyses that have been done on the potential of solar. As you know, the Commission on Energy Infrastructure, Siting and Permitting is also looking at some tools for communities and for the Commonwealth to evaluate siting. And so I think that looking at those recommendations, I believe are coming out in March, will also be helpful. But I cannot claim that the maps on the study are ironclad, and I think that it will take some human interpretation, and I'm sure it will be an iterative process on siting and on any incentives as well.
I do want to thank you for, another question's coming here. I do want to thank you for taking a shot at figuring out what a community's responsibility ought to be with respect to siting solar, creating metrics, as it were. I'm only raising an issue about whether these particular metrics are reliable enough. My question, though, is you would hand out carrots to communities that met the minimum threshold for siting solar. In other cases, let's say in housing, we define siting a certain amount of new housing or affordable housing as a responsibility of a municipality. So there you might say that there are sticks involved. Monies are withheld if a community doesn't bear its fair share of the burden as defined by law. Are we getting to the point in terms of falling behind on our clean energy goals where we should consider whether a community shouldn't have to again bear its fair share of siting solar? And is the attempt to use positive incentives, which doesn't yield a absolutely predictable result, sufficient? Should we move beyond carrots to requirements?
That's a tough one. I know that local self-determination is a cherished value here in the Commonwealth, and that there are also larger statewide goals that we need to really evaluate, the balance of carrots and sticks. So I don't have a definitive answer for you on that one. I'm sure that others will continue to look at that. I hope that we can get to a place where more communities will see the overall benefits in terms of where we are trying to go with our power mix and moving to electric powered vehicles and buildings and cleaner generation and reliability. But we know that there might be some cases where there could be a cause for sticks or state intervention, frankly.
All right, well,
so I'm
thank
sure
you.
that
No, I hear you. It is a tough question. I agree with you. Well, I want to thank you very much for testifying today.
Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in person next time. Sorry about the camera.
Me too. We will now hear from Arthur and I hope I can pronounce Arthur's last name. It could be Arthur Desloges on S2394. Arthur is a town meeting member in the town of Plymouth.
Yes. Can you see me and hear me okay?
I can hear you great, can't see you at all. Oh, there you are, Arthur. Whoops, saw you
Okay.
briefly, one brief shining moment. Can see you
How's
again.
that?
Good, good. All right, let's hear you. Let's hear your testimony. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Art Disloges, and I am a town meeting member from the town of Plymouth. I speak in support of S2394, an act updating the Citizens Advisory Panel and strengthening citizen participation in the panel for the decommissioning of the nuclear power plant at Plymouth. I am also on the Save Our Bay Grassroots Coalition. Our mission is to protect the health and environment from harm that would be caused by the discharge of radioactive water and radioactive evaporated air into the local environment by Holtec International, the company contracted to decommission the Pilgrim nuclear power plant. Our entire community is deeply concerned, even frightened, by the possibility of exposure to radionuclides and other contaminants. Our task is formidable because we are blocked by the state committee created to oversee this issue. Let me explain. The Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel, NDCAP, was created by state law to act as a conduit for community concerns during the decommissioning process. The problem is that many of the panel members are not from the community, nor do they represent community values. Because some of these panel members have past affiliation with Holtec, the community believes they are Holtec friendly. A case in point is the recent tentative determination by the Department of Environmental Protection to deny Holtec a permit to discharge this radioactive water into Cape Cod Bay. It was grassroots groups working without the help of NDCAP who compelled state regulators to make a permit denial. In contrast, NDCAP never considered any motions nor took any votes on this issue. The community believes this occurred because Holtec and members of the panel friendly to Holtec de facto block these movements. The solution is to reconstitute the membership of the panel to ensure that the community is fairly represented. That is what this bill does. A principle is to have diversity in choosing members in the panel. The bill, in addition to reappointing the state agencies that currently serve, will have new members from respected groups known to put the community first. They would include representatives appointed by the Plymouth Board of Health, the Plymouth Preservation Committee, and others. The bill removes Holtec as a voting member. The new panel would go a long way to ensure that community values are represented and establish citizen trust in this state panel. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Desloges, for putting together this bill and for raising these issues. Let me just make an editorial, or let me offer some advice to you, because I'm aware that at the moment your bill is not supported by the Plymouth delegation. I would suggest that you keep the current committee, but propose adding 1, 2, possibly 3 members to it. Your chances of replacing the entire committee are 0. What you need, because it will strike people as too radical a step, and they won't feel confident making a judgment. The legislature won't, because we're not down there in Plymouth. So what you need to do is to seek a compromise. Keep the current commission in place. I disagree with you that it should be all folks from Plymouth. The values you're talking about are shared by everybody who lives in the state of Massachusetts. Nobody wants this stuff in their backyard poisoning their residents, so there's no difference between Plymouth's interests and broader interests, but there is no question that the town should have a voice or voices. So I would go back to the drawing board if I were you, and I would ask yourself, can we introduce additional voices? Not because the values are going ignored. As I say, no one wants to die or get sick from this stuff, so everyone is more or less on reading from the same hymn book, except for the industry types. And I don't want to talk about that. You and I will just have to disagree if you think that state officials who work for a state agency are somehow biased or prejudiced. Let's not go there. Just see if you can come up with one or two additional voices, maybe three, to be added to the additional commission, because then you have at least a logical shot.
Sure. Senator, thank you for those comments, and if I may give a brief response.
Sure.
First of all the state agencies that's just not correct the way this bill is worded, and I can only have 3 minutes to
Yeah,
go
I
through
haven't
all
read the
details.
bill. I haven't had time
Yeah.
to go in to compare the current
Sure.
membership to your projected new membership. So granted, I'm just guessing that you would attempt
Yeah.
a dramatic
So-
overhaul. I'm looking for an incremental change.
Yeah, and that's what this bill does. It keeps many of the same members,
I see.
including all the state agencies. They are absolutely there because they are a respected part of the decisioning process. It removes other people that are not part of state.
How many
council.
people would you drop? How many new people would you add?
It would be a drop of about 7 to 8. It would be a replacement of 7 to 8 people, and it would be for the wider community. So include all of Cape Cod, all of Duxbury, all of Greater Plymouth. So it does many of the things you said. And this bill, quite frankly, is in opposition to another bill that the state delegation, part of the state delegation put forward that reduces citizen participation in this panel. It reduces it from 21 to 15, and it guarantees that citizens will have no voice on this panel. And that is what my constituency have supported me in.
I
Thank you
see.
for
Well,
the
that's
time.
good. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the local politics one way or the other. I just noticed that this particular bill was submitted by request, which means without the support of the delegation.
Yes.
That's all I know. I encourage you to continue your conversations with the local delegation, see if you can reach a compromise. A replacement of 7 or 8 people strikes me, and I'm just talking about the political optics, not the merits, as too big, as too ambitious. So keep tooling away. I appreciate the perspective you want to bring, but you hear me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Senator.
We're going to go on and invite Mr. Robert Giles to testify on H 3950. How are you, Mr. Giles?
I am well, thank you,
Thanks for coming in person.
Chair Barrett and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you. So I'm Robert Giles, the CEO of PACE Funding Group, a leading residential PACE company active in California and Florida, and hopefully at some point here in Massachusetts. I'm here in support of Representative Socolo's Bill 3950.
What's your company again?
It's PACE Funding Group is the legal name, but we do business as Home Run Financing.
Very good. Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, a little confusing that way. So I'm here in support of 3950. I realize the bill's at the earliest stages, and there's lots of details to work out to make it a well-functioning program, but I thought I'd just share a few observations. First, PACE financing is a private sector financing vehicle. It uses private sector capital to solve local problems. As we've heard many times over some of the hearings, over half of the buildings and houses here in the Commonwealth are old and leaky and in need of repair, and responsible for about 50% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions. We've also heard experts say that the Commonwealth's decarbonization roadmap will require billions above what's being made available through the existing taxpayer government assistance programs. PACE is a proven way to raise billions of dollars for private sector capital for energy efficiency measures. We've already raised something like $6 billion from large financial institutions, insurance companies, asset managers, banks, et cetera, to improve energy efficiency measures for homeowners in California and Florida. In Massachusetts, you already have a fairly successful government assistance program, Mass Save, with tax credits and low interest rates. And while this program has been effective, it's limited in 3 important ways. First, PACE can include more than just energy efficiency. For other important conservation measures like water conservation in California, storm hardening in Florida, impact-resistant windows, et cetera. It could be for seawalls, for an environment like this, septic to sewer, whatever the local problem is. I think of PACE as a local financing solution for local problems. Second, PACE can offer larger dollar amounts of mass save, which are needed for larger retrofit projects where homes have decades of deferred maintenance, and need everything, right? The roofs, insulation, walls, HVAC systems, et cetera. Those are expensive systems that can get up to $100,000 or more. And third, PACE is available to a much larger group than Mass Save, which is really only available to homeowners with relatively high FICO scores. And that's because the banks that administer the Mass Save program require high FICOs between 680 and 720 for the regular loan program. And for the larger loan program, I believe it goes up to $50,000, requires a minimum FICO score of 720, which is fully half of the homeowners in Massachusetts would not be eligible based on that. They have FICOs lower than that. So PACE and Mass Save are not mutually exclusive. PACE can work right alongside a Mass Save, providing additional amounts needed for larger home projects. In closing, PACE is a proven financing tool available to the Commonwealth as it tries to achieve its ambitious decarbonization goals. It will take many different sources of private capital in the 10 billion range from experts that we've heard from, and PACE should be among them. I mean, why not? Why exclude it? So I urge the committee to move forward with the development of 3950. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Giles. We really appreciate your coming to join us today. Can you shed some light candidly on why this idea, which has been around a long time, extending PACE to residences, hasn't caught on, hasn't happened?
Right.
It exists in Massachusetts for commercial properties, as you point out. There must be some consumer protection worries. Something's holding this back. What is it?
Yeah, no, very good point. And I think the answer is honestly in the early days when the program was first rolled out, there weren't enough consumer protection guardrails in place. And there were some bad deals or deceptive sales practices or whatever that occurred. And those have become very publicized. And the industry has become much better. There's 4 of us companies that are operating in this business have really dramatically improved the consumer protections, and it's a very good business. As the data proves, there are very few customer complaints and lawsuits and problems. It's very cleaned up. We touch the customer many, many times in this whole process to make sure that they understand it, including recorded phone calls. Everything is fully disclosed in numerous ways. So there are very few complaints today. Yet the issues from 3 to 5 years ago or 7 years ago even linger, and it's been very difficult to change that narrative. We're trying our best to do that because it's a great program that brings capital to really this, in particular, the sweet spot for PACE is the low to medium income group, which has below average FICO scores. And
very briefly, what is the financing mechanism here?
Yep.
What's the concept here?
Yeah, so it runs, the repayment runs through the property tax payment mechanism. It's actually, and that's what makes it different from any other kind of a consumer loan. It's actually put onto the tax roll. It's a line item on the property tax bill, just like a school bond or whatever. And that's how the homeowner repays the debt. So it's very secure in that regard.
When you say that's exactly what happens, how does the homeowner repay that?
When they pay their property tax bill, they pay it for the full amount, which includes the PACE assessment. It gets paid to, up through the county, or in this case, in Massachusetts, I guess it's the towns.
The municipality.
Yeah, the municipality, and then it's segregated, and then through a bond trustee. It's really an old form of municipal assessment bond financing used for real estate development. It's just been, the structure is identical, it's just been
Now, is
repurposed.
this a loan made to the individual property owner?
Yes.
Who is then paying back principal and interest on her property tax bill?
That's exactly right. I mean, it kind of looks a lot like a loan with, mortgage sale amortization, yeah. It's all fixed rate, there's no variable rate. The homeowner can repay it at any time with no prepayment penalties. It functions a lot like a loan, yes.
What tend to be the interest rates charged? If you're loaning to folks who don't have high FICO scores, I imagine the interest rates may have to compensate for the additional risk.
Yes, that's right. It's certainly a lot less expensive than what their other alternatives would be. Credit cards are in the 25% range, other forms of private financing in that same range. So it's really, for these folks that have very limited, frankly, options available to them, it's one of the most cost-effective.
Have you had an opportunity, have you had succeeded in engaging members of the executive branch? You would have DOER develop regs here. Have you had an opportunity to discuss this with DOER?
No, not as of yet, but that's a good idea.
These days, especially, I'm just talking politics for a moment here, not that politics ever enters these august halls typically, but where you have a new governor who's a
Right.
Democrat and a Democratic legislature, the good news is DOER is interested in, as a general principle, in ideas and in new policies that might not have taken root earlier. But on the other hand, because the comfort level between the executive and the legislature has improved a little bit, given the congruity of the parties, we would look to DOER before we were to move something like this, and we would really want them to agree that this was a good idea. I'm just surmising, I can't speak for the entire legislature, but you get
Right.
my drift.
Yeah, no doubt it needs to enjoy broad support, and so that's something we need to work on.
Well, I really appreciate your raising this. The time has come for us to consider mechanisms in addition to mass saves, certainly. So this is timely in that sense, and I appreciate your raising this.
I appreciate your having me here and giving it consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mary Luvano, who's H3950. Perhaps Mary's with us remotely.
Yes, Senator, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, good to hear you well, and we can see you as well, Ms. Luvano.
Oh, great. Terrific. Thank you. Thank you for your time, Senator and members of the committee, or Chair Barrett and members of the committee. My name is Mary Luevano, and I'm the Acting Executive Director of PACE Nation, which is the National Industry Association representing the PACE industry. We represent all stakeholders, including local governments, environmental and clean energy nonprofits, private capital providers. You just heard from one of my members, Bob Giles, the CEO of Home Run Financing, and many others who support a robust industry committed to meeting multiple public policy goals. I'm here today to speak in support of H3950, and we want to thank Representative Sicolo for her leadership on this bill in the House, and also to Vice Chair Pacheco for his leadership on similar legislation in the Senate. Adoption of residential PACE would ensure a safe and affordable housing financing option for your constituents when installing measures that help lower their energy bills and increase the comfort of their homes. PACE projects also help reduce harmful greenhouse gas emissions, create jobs, and improve the resiliency of our communities against extreme weather events. To date, over 344,000 upgrades have already been done with PACE financing nationally, creating over 100,000 jobs and preventing 9.5 million tons of carbon from entering the atmosphere. A residential PACE program that is utilized by just 15% of Massachusetts homeowners could create over 112,000 jobs, predominantly in construction and manufacturing. It could also abate 6.8 million metric tons of carbon emissions and reduce natural gas emissions equivalent to taking a natural gas plant offline for 2 years. And all of this is done, as Bob mentioned earlier, without taxpayer funds, with private capital. We are eager to work with the agencies identified in the bill to help provide our expertise. Again, we're a national organization representing PACE programs across the country, to help evaluate best practices, provide data, which we do a lot of. We do a lot of data collection at PACE Nation, and whatever else is needed. Massachusetts can lead the nation by codifying rigorous ground rules at the outset, with an emphasis on seniors and low-income homeowners. You guys talked about some of the consumer protections that are needed, and some of the ones that we suggest are things like requiring written disclosures and live recorded phone calls to confirm that homeowners understand the terms of the agreements, requiring PACE lenders to vet, train, and monitor contractors, and requiring homeowners to certify that they're satisfied with the work before payment is made, requiring lenders to evaluate homeowners' ability to repay, and requiring a 3-day business right to cancel for a homeowner to rescind agreement without consequence, no questions asked. These are just a couple of the 22 consumer protection measures that PACE Nation supports on a national level. They were developed in conjunction with consumer law experts, civil rights organizations, and environmental organizations, and have worked well in other places like California and Florida. I thank you for considering my testimony today as you evaluate this important language, and are happy to be a resource for you and your staff.
Well, thank you very much. I want to expand on the thoughts that I expressed to Mr. Giles. There's going to be some nervousness because generically direct sales to low-income and moderate-income consumers, and I'm thinking of the electric power sector and the controversy over so-called competitive suppliers of electric power, there's nervousness about whether the consumers can be informed enough to, whether any of us consumers can be informed enough to make relatively sophisticated financial decisions, and maybe there's a particular concern with folks who have moderate incomes. And so you guys not only need to try to touch base with DOER, but with the Massachusetts Attorney General. By state law here, and this is different than in many states, by state law here, the Attorney General is our legally designated advocate for consumers, protecting them against rip-offs and higher than necessary costs. So the AG plays the role that consumer advocates or independent elected figures play in other states. In addition, we have a handful of consumer groups. You know about the National Consumer Law Center. They're very active in Massachusetts in terms of testifying, and I would want to know what they felt about residential PACE. I think the Green Energy Consumers Alliance is another entity. We actually have a representative of that organization with us in this hearing room. I think you'd want to touch base with the Green Energy Consumers Alliance to get their read. In order to increase I'm interested in what you've got to say here and what you've got to propose, but in order to increase the comfort level for me and for other legislators, we would need some sign-offs as a practical matter before we felt that this was going to avoid the pitfalls that some other direct-to-consumer sales have involved for low-income people. But that said, Senator Pacheco's an impressive advocate, Representative Sokolo's an impressive advocate, so you're halfway to first base, but there just are a number of additional bases to be touched.
Well, I appreciate that feedback, and we'd be more than happy to talk to all of the folks that you've mentioned. And as I said, there are 22 consumer protection principles that PACE Nation adopted and that we require our members to abide by. And in California, where PACE originated, those consumer protection principles are working. And our regulator, the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, releases a report every year. They just did their annual update recently, and they've shown that those consumer protections are working just simply through the data and statistics that they collect. So I would urge, folks who are interested in that to look at those reports.
Well, thank you very much, and that's thank you for engaging on all these questions, and I want to encourage you to pursue it in Massachusetts because I think all things considered, we're interested in additional financing mechanisms for property owners. So thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much for your time.
We now want to hear from Valessa. It could be Vanessa. This could be a typo. Valessa or Vanessa Suter-Klein, with SEIA on H3967.
Excellent. And you can hear me and see me?
Yes, we can. Could you just introduce yourself so that we can make sure we have your first name right?
I sure can. It's not a typo. My parents had to be a little unique, so they put an L in there. It's Valessa Suter Klein.
Good to know.
I respond to both also.
Well, welcome.
Thank
And I
you.
know you don't like this bill, and neither do I. It's changed. I'm interested in the larger question of the rate restructuring.
And I actually don't have testimony on that because we are reviewing, and I really appreciated your remarks on sort of the balance between solar and electrification and efficiency. So I was not going to dig into that bill today, but noted your remarks and appreciate that. And we are closely following it and very interested in this rate discussion in the Commonwealth.
Good. Yeah, no, we do want to get the balance right, no question. And I'm sorry, I cut you off. You were going to speak to the merits of 3967 instead?
So I'll give brief testimony and then happy to answer questions or address anything else.
Thank you.
All right. So backing up, good morning. Good to see you, and thank you for holding this hearing, Chair Barrett. My name is Valessa Suter Klein. I'm the Northeast Director for the Solar Energy Industries Association. SEIA is the National Trade Association for the United States Solar and Storage Industries. And SEIA, we work with our more than 1,000 member companies and other partners to fight for policies that create jobs in every community and shape fair market rules that promote competition and the growth of reliable, low-cost solar power. There are just under 500 solar companies located in Massachusetts, supporting more than 11,000 jobs. And that is in addition to national firms also conducting business in the Commonwealth. First and foremost, SEIA appreciates all of the essential work the legislature and in particular this committee has done to ensure that Massachusetts is a leader in the climate, in addressing the climate crisis, Solar and storage represent an opportunity to bring tried and true affordable clean power online. I'm here to speak in support of H3967, an act supporting solar energy deployment in the Commonwealth, very similar to testimony to that we heard earlier from NECEC. The first section of H3967 establishes a target for solar. Governor Healy had set forth a goal of 10 gigawatts of solar by 2030, and this bill would put that goal into statute. SEIA strongly supports taking this step. Codifying the 10 gigawatt solar goal will empower the Commonwealth to track progress across sectors and thereby remain on a consistent path towards decarbonization. H3967 does two additional things as well. The bill encourages local jurisdictions to expand the Green Communities program, proactively ensuring that solar can be sited and progress can continue apace. There's more to discuss there for sure. And I'll note here that the work of the Siting and Permitting Commission is certainly relevant to the overall objective of this section of the bill. Lastly, but importantly, the bill removes a 2022 Climate Act deadline for DOER to enter into regional agreements for transmission and clean energy. This measure will enable DOER to pursue regional procurement opportunities going forward. And SEIA encourages the committee to move this important bill forward. And that's all I have on that, and I appreciate your time and consideration, and happy to discuss further.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, just a matter of semantics. Do you want us to refer to communities who might get a designation as climate leaders or as Green Communities Plus leaders?
So we had put that language in prior to when DOER came out with an updated climate leaders program. And to be completely honest, I think the overall intent here is more important than the specific language in this bill, given that there's so much work and conversation happening in Massachusetts around siting. So we certainly strongly support having sort of proactive targets within the Green Communities or Climate Leaders program. I'm happy to go with whatever sort of the prevailing name is. I don't feel strongly on that front. And I think you asked a question of NECEC earlier, sort of this carrot or stick approach. And I think from SIA's perspective, I would say that we know that siting and interconnection are the two biggest challenges to meeting our very important climate goals. And I think proactive sort of volunteer-based programs like Green Communities are phenomenal. They're popular, they're well adopted, and trying to make those more robust and effective is a good approach. But I also don't think it will get us all the way there. And I do appreciate that the Siting Commission is looking at ways to ensure a robust process, but also streamline and make more efficient the review process to get solar projects brought online.
Thank you. I have a question. We could end up clearing away obstacles to siting and permitting and seeing a lot more electric infrastructure sited, or at least permitted, sited in the sense that properties might be designated. But it's also possible that the electric companies would then sit on the permits and not act on them. All kinds of other things come into play after all, including international conditions and certainly interest rates. So what is the risk in our handing permits to the electric companies, but then not seeing them follow through and interconnect and to solar developers? Is there a way to join up or to link the help we're going to extend to the electric companies, which will make them huge amounts of money as the grid grows, the electric utilities are going to grow? Is there a way to link up the help we're going to extend to the electric companies with their responsibility to actually act on those permits and interconnect to projects proposed by your members?
It's a fascinating question, and I've certainly
Is an interconnection
closely...
a possible? Let me put it another way. Couldn't they still take their time conducting interconnection studies, even with the permits in hand, and then what would you have gained?
So I think you're referring to the substation siting bill, which would help build out much needed infrastructure. It does not solve all the problems. It solves one very important problem, or proposes to. Interconnection for speeding up the interconnection process, which is an ongoing challenge and somewhat being reviewed through the Grid Modernization Advisory Council, GMAC, and the ESMP process is kicking off. That also needs addressing. Whether there's a way to connect those two things, I have not looked at it from that perspective. But I think it's more that these are all parts of the sort of overall challenge of bringing clean energy online in a grid that's a little bit outdated and needs some updates and improvements for sure.
Well, here's the thing. The consumer's going to pay a lot when she is asked or he is asked to give up environmental laws that have been in place for 50 years on the local level, conservation commissions and things, and giving up protections that are available in state law and have been for decades. So if the public interest is going to be put in the balance, into play, then it would make sense in the same statute to require that the interconnections actually happen so that we get the outcome that the public wants, which is a robust grid and a clean grid. My constituents aren't interested in facilitating siting and permitting. They're interested in a clean grid, the outcome, the ultimate outcome. So the quandary that a half step poses for my constituents is we would clear the way for the utilities, but then leave them in charge of timing nevertheless. And as I say, my constituents don't care one way or the other about siting and permitting. I guess they would be opposed to changes on balance because it means the surrender of home rule. But we nevertheless might go forward and facilitate easier siting and permitting, but only if the payoff, which is the actual completed grid, the actual functioning solar development, has to happen in the same process. Why would we give up the protections of current law, each of which won the approval of the state legislature over the years, and not ensure that we would actually see the outcomes our constituents want?
So first, I hadn't prepared testimony on this, so I think this is part of a broader question around this bill. But there are a couple of things in what you said that I think are important. And, first and foremost, I want to be absolutely clear that the industry is not asking to change any environmental laws or otherwise not go through a robust permitting process. We support responsibly sited solar and storage, and that's always been true. However, the process right now has a lot of redundancies and a lot of ways that it could be improved. And I think that that's worth looking at, because we know that right now we are not on track to meet our solar targets. And for a number of reasons, some of them you outlined, it's a slow process, but also the grid needs updating. So I think that there are many pieces here, and I'm not sure we can address them all through this one bill. But I hear what you're saying, which is, if this bill moves forward and the utilities can site infrastructure, which is a good thing and will bring on more clean energy, you want to make sure that those results are realized. And so that's an interesting question, and I want to talk to my members and think that through a little bit more, but I'd love to continue that discussion.
You're obviously, and I don't say this in an accusatory way, it occurs to me that you and your members are confident that you'll be able to actually build a lot of projects if we sweep away these local and state laws in their current form. And let's you can't, hold on, I know, let's assume that what you want to say has already been said, so you don't have to say it again, which is that you want a perfect balance struck, you want nothing sacrificed, you just want a more expedient process. It goes without saying, we all want perfection. Nevertheless, if we're going to make it easier for the electric utilities to build infrastructure, don't we have a right to ask in the same bill that the outcomes are actually realized? And the outcomes are cleaner electricity, completed projects, not permitted projects, completed projects.
Absolutely, how we go about that is an interesting question, and I don't have an answer for that.
Well, that's my job. I've got 199 people to work with, state reps and state senators. We have a right to insist that both halves of the equation be present in the same bill. It's not that hard. We would say, words to the effect of, projects have to be completed or penalties will be imposed. You don't get to sit on permits. They expire by a given date. That would be one possibility. Another possibility is you have to show actual outcomes, or the process defaults back to the reimposition of current local and state statutes. There are all kinds of ways to structure the requirement that there be follow-through.
Absolutely, and I think I'm very interested in this conversation, and I think it's worth continuing. And I think when you say something like putting timelines on permits, great, but also understanding how those permits interact with other jurisdictions and other processes of the whole development process is important, so that we don't have staggered expirations or something like that, sort of creating more problems. So that would be. Yes, let's.
Okay, great. You get where I'm coming from. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
I'm trying to broaden the conversation. I think I have worries about permit banking, about the electric companies just banking the permit approvals and not actually acting to build the clean energy. Yeah. And I just wonder if there's a way to address that. But let's drop that. We've beat that horse enough. I want to raise one more
Fair
issue.
enough.
I just want to point out something
Okay.
to you. The reason that there's a deadline of December 31st, 2022 in the DRIVE Act for this coordination with other New England states is because that language was directed solely at the onshore wind project proposed in the state of Maine and Aroostook County. We put a deadline on that because we wanted to help facilitate that potential source of clean energy, but we didn't want to give open-ended authorization, something we hadn't thought about. What happened, as you know, is that the main project has fallen through. There is not going to be at present any onshore wind in Aroostook County. Everything has to be rebid, much as some offshore wind projects involving Massachusetts have to be rebid. Essentially, the developer pulled out. So we can't continue this language in your section 4 of this legislation until we have much more clarity around which projects we're talking about. And I just want to point out that that language in the DRIVE Act was very situation specific. And if we're going to renew it, it would have to involve conversations once again with the state of Maine and with other regional partners. Presumably those conversations might have begun, but I've not heard about that. And we're going to sit on this until the executive branch comes to us and says, as it did in 2022, we need this because we've got a live one. We've got real opportunities here that require the language. That's what we heard in 2022. The developer reneged on the state of Maine, with the state of Maine, and thus with us, and you get my drift here.
Understood. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for testifying, and I'm a big fan of SEIA. I want to tempt you. I know you kind of got this thing going with the electric utility. You kind of have an agreement that you'll be their friend in the hopes that they'll be your friend later, but I want you to think harder about whether there should be linkage.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you. Good to hear from you.
Likewise. Thank you. Appreciate this.
There are additional folks who wish to testify today on any of the bills before us. Hearing none, we'll declare this hearing adjourned, and we'll want to thank all of you for participating.